One of the biggest topics in all of memory research is actually when memory goes wrong or forgetting. A lot of what we can learn from looking into forgetting can speak to the way that memory actually functions. Because if we can see the ways that memory fails us sometimes, it can give us insight into how memory is supposed to work in the first place. So in this presentation, we're going to just do an overview of a couple of the different ways that memory seems to fail us. We're going to approach it from the perspective of psychologist Daniel Schachter's 7 sins of memory. Over the course of these 7 sins of memory, Schachter is going to speak to what he calls sins of omission and then sins of commission. And so the first 3 are going to be failures of memory where we actually forget information, where memory is not really working at all, and we can't retrieve information. And then the final 4 are going to be what he calls sins of commission, where we're remembering information, but the info that we're recalling is inaccurate in some way. So first we'll start with the sin of absent-mindedness. This is a term which refers to things just seeming to like slip out of your memory system. It's a result of either a lapse of attention in the first place. You're not paying attention during the encoding stage, and so you can't recall the information later. Also can be an issue with retrieval. You're not able to properly recall or even recognize the information. Examples from your own life. Maybe you promised your mom or your dad you're going to pick milk up on the way home from school, and you get home and you realize, oh my goodness, like I completely forgot to do that. That slip of memory would be a sign of absent-mindedness. Another one, you get home from school and you throw your bag somewhere, you put your keys somewhere else, you go start doing your homework in your bedroom, and then when you go to find your backpack later or find your keys later, you can't remember where you put them because you weren't paying attention in the first place. So that's just what absent-mindedness means, usually due to encoding failure. Second, we have what's called transience, and the term transient means sort of moving. If you talk about a person who leads a transient lifestyle, they're constantly moving from place to place. And so this sin of memory is just going to speak to the fact that memory itself sometimes is transient in the sense that things we once knew sometimes just fade away over time. A lot of transience and this decreasing of memory's accessibility is due to the natural aging process. But there can be some really severe instances of this, whether it's due to damage in your temporal lobes or to your hippocampus. Sometimes you can suffer from pretty severe amnesia because of this transient property. Third and final sin of omission is what's known as blocking. And with blocking, the information is there. So it's not the same as transience where the info really is gone almost forever. Here, the information is there. You just can't recall it when you want to. You might experience what's called the tip of the tongue phenomenon, where there's information and it's like right there on the tip of your tongue. You just can't recall it. And then later on, when you're doing something else and when you're not focused on that information whatsoever, it just pops into your mind, the correct info. So it's a temporary inaccessibility of stored information. Now we enter the sins of commission, which are mistakes that your memory makes where you're recalling information, but the information you recall is somewhat inaccurate. First one, and there's a lot of research into this one, some of which we'll do later together in class, is the sin of misattribution. First, I guess we have to define what attribution means, and you guys might have encountered this term before when you're dealing with attribution of sources. When you write a paper or do a presentation and you have to cite your sources, sometimes we might call that giving proper attribution. You have to identify where the information came from in the first place. So when you attribute something to its source, you're identifying the origin of that info. Well, sometimes your memory gets that attribution wrong, and it has information, and the information itself might be solid, but you misidentify where the information came from in the first place. Or sometimes you also can believe something happened when it hasn't happened at all. One example, and why we have this cute little sleeping puppy right above me, is sometimes you might experience this phenomenon where you don't know if you dreamed something or if it actually happened in real life. Something feels real, but then you question, wait, did that happen or did it just happen in a dream whilst I was sleeping? That's an example of misattribution. The memory itself is there, you just don't remember where the memory came from. And this is a topic which is looked into pretty heavily for eyewitness testimony, for example. A lot of the sins of commission have real world consequences for that. But where you remember seeing something or hearing something, but you're just wrong about the context within which you saw it or you heard it. Another sin of commission, another one which has consequences for court cases and for the veracity of eyewitness testimony, is suggestibility. Our memory systems are highly suggestible. We're really likely to incorporate misleading or misinformation into our memory. Little kids seem especially prone to this, where a leading question can cause us to alter our memory of an event. Elizabeth Loftus is a really big name in this area. I encounter this sometimes. My mom has a tendency when she asks me a question, she also provides what she thinks the answer is. So let's say my mom and I have made plans to meet up over the weekend. As opposed to just asking me like, oh, hey, what time are we supposed to meet up? She'll instead say, oh, what time are we meeting? Is it 2 o'clock? And so now she's provided this information, which could potentially be inaccurate, but it starts to incorporate itself into my own recall. And I find it very difficult to now ascertain, wait, is it 2 o'clock that we're meeting, or am I just thinking that because my mom has suggested that? Maybe a less light example would be kids who are who are part of an investigation into possible abuse. Investigators need to be very careful about how they ask questions in that type of circumstance. Just by asking those types of questions, little kids can sometimes incorporate that into their memory, and they can start to believe abuse has happened when it potentially hasn't. Now, a lot of times, certainly don't get me wrong, abuse allegations are valid, but in order to determine whether or not they are, investigators are very careful nowadays to make sure that their line of questioning is done in a certain way so as not to taint someone's memory. The sin of bias refers to the fact that our memory is very subjective, and our current self oftentimes colors our past recollections. So what you believe about someone in the present can change the way you recall them in the past. Some of this research has looked at relationships. People who have been in a relationship but then have broken up, sometimes with a messy breakup, are apt to look back at their relationship and at that person that they were involved with and view them in a more negative light than maybe is accurate because they currently don't like that person and the relationship is such like a sore spot for them in the current moment. When they look back at it, all they can seem to focus on is the bad stuff, and they even remember events a little differently, like, oh, like even then I knew I didn't like that person, or I could see the writing was on the wall for the relationship. It's not necessarily true for what you felt at the time, but your memory has since been colored by what you're feeling currently. And then lastly, we have the sin of what's called persistence. And this is one which seems to speak more to some of the negative types of memories. But sometimes the things that you want to forget most are the things that you can't forget. So persistence is defined as the intrusion of unwanted memories. A very real world concerning example of this would be PTSD. PTSD certainly is a multifaceted disorder, but oftentimes it's marked by flashbacks to a traumatic event. And so that's an event that people would 100% want to forget. But that's also a type of event that your memory system seems to store, unfortunately, really well because of all the stress hormones involved. And so those types of traumatic events keep popping up in your mind. Less serious example, if you've ever made a mistake in front of a group of people or done something embarrassing, it seems like you just can't let it go. You're trying to go to bed at night and all you do is keep ruminating over that over and over again. The things that we most want to disappear and maybe fall prey to transience are the things which seem to be most persistent.